Well, Linnea, thank you for being here today and being willing to share your wealth of knowledge with everyone at NTTA in our workshop with Native Network today. So I'd love to have you introduce yourself. You can, say who you are, who you work for, what your role is, and then how long you've been there.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca, Native Network. Hey Young, my name is Linnea Jackson. I am a member of the Hoopa Valley Tribe. I'm also a descendant of the Yurok, Tolowa, Karuk, and Wiyot people, which is really encompassed in Northern California. So that lineage is something that's very important to me. Currently, I serve as the general manager for the Hoopa Valley Tribe's public utilities. So we started off as a chartered entity 42 years ago, providing critical services such as domestic water and irrigation, solid waste management, broadband, and renewable energy projects, which is something that we're working on that goes hand in hand with fiber optic and connectivity projects. That's a little bit about public utilities. I was appointed as the general manager 5 years ago in June of 2019. Prior to that, I worked for Hoopa Land Management, and that's comprised of tribal EPA and the realty department. So it goes hand in hand with water, land management, understanding land statuses, which gave me a really great foundation for some of the environmental permitting and build outs and infrastructure that ultimately ties back to the land. So I've had a progression over the last, 13 years of experiences that have really lent itself to being able to have the skill set for this job.
Are there any other things other than just your previous roles that you feel like have helped prepare you for the position that you're currently in?
First and foremost, as Native people, I think we always have to tie back to our families. And so I've always been taught to, hold yourself with integrity, have a strong work ethic. I had grandfathers that really were meticulous about the work that they did, making sure that everything was done right and complete the first time. So I think that foundational work ethic coming from my family, it has lent itself to every single task that we're doing now. So it all starts with family, and I think, how we were raised. I had the opportunity to travel a bit with my mom, and so I was actually raised in Anchorage, Alaska, and I think having, different experiences allowed me to have kind of a broader perspective on how to manage that. I also lived in LA for 13 years, and I worked for trust and estate attorney, and I worked a couple of years for a CPA firm. And the management of business, you have to have a financial management understanding. So little did I know that those years of experience would progress me and allow me to have insight in some of the things that it takes to manage large-scale projects and broadband projects as well.
So it seems like you've been very strategic about preparing for the future. And we often talk about sustainability as kind of the buzzword around future longevity and preparation. And I think it's really important to have a common understanding of what we mean when we say the word sustainable or when we talk about sustainability. So can you tell us what is your definition of sustainability?
My definition of sustainability, first I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. So Hoopa Public Utilities, and other tribes have this as well, is a chartered tribal utility. We do not receive funding, for operation and management from the tribe, and we are required to be sustainable. And that support comes from your monthly services that you provide. So the water helps offset, the solid waste management offsets, the broadband offsets, and it's a delicate balance. So sustainability for me, because a lot of tribal nations have not had investment of broadband infrastructure and high-speed internet, largely because the larger telecoms, there's not a huge return on investment of building in that area. So I think sustainability for me in my mind allows us to A, provide sound service, B, to cover the overhead and management costs of each of those components that make up your network and make up your business structure, being able to support your tribal employees, which trickles down to their family, to have a really good wage and be compensated for the job that they're doing, having reserve to be able to cover those emergencies or those upgrades that need to come, because the electronics, the radios, the trucks need to be replaced, based on their certain life cycle and use. So you not only just have to be able to pay the monthly overhead, and long term, you also have to be able to have replacement costs. So when I wrap the word sustainability, it comes with all of those things: providing great service, being great customers to your community and your tribal governments, being able to support your employees, being able to pay all of the bills and have a reserve to cover those, because without that, it's not going to be a success.
So can you tell us about your approach to sustainability in your telecom planning?
So this comes from lessons learned. So when we were thinking about developing our own WISP, this was pre-COVID, so we were submitting for different types of grants through the California Public Utilities Commission and other mechanisms. And so all of a sudden we had this huge pandemic to where departments were shut down, schools were closed, people were working from home, lack of connectivity. And so our main focus there was to be able to provide service. And we kind of had to have a, tidal wave of ramping up, getting the frequencies, the tower locations, the equipment, people trained. And so that push didn't allow us to then develop the business end. What do those service line agreements look like? What are your terms and conditions? All of those business things that we didn't have to think about because we are just trying to solve the connectivity issue and that digital divide that was really, really apparent, throughout 20 and 21 to 2. And so I think that understanding that we would, in hindsight, we would look at, okay, this component, costs X number of dollars, and it's going to be on the, it's going to last this long. We have to have replacement costs. I think one thing that's helped us is having the CPUC have technical assistance for tribes, and that has allowed us to look at business pro forma. It's allowing us to look at those different financial studies. And so any tribe that is looking at even working with an incumbent, building out yourself, whatever that model looks like, you're still going to need the business pro forma. And I think that looks at a 5-year projection of what's your current projection for customers. What is that growth rate? What are all the things that make up your costs that you're going to have to cover? Because we would have looked at rate studies. What are we going to have to charge, our customers to be able to facilitate all that? So I really think having funding and continued funding, because as this is an ever-growing network, one pro forma isn't going to basically serve you 5 years later. And so when we did our first study, we were only serving wirelessly. And so we're talking, COVID time. Now we are doing full fiber optic builds outs, and that business structure looks a little bit different. We've purchased directional drilling equipment and some of the other vac trucks and vac trailers that we need. So the business model looks differently. So I would urge everybody to, hire a firm that's experienced in that to be able to shape your network so you understand the cost to manage and ongoing replacement costs as well.
I think that is great advice, and I love that you brought it around to kind of an active way of moving forward with that, because I think when some people hear that, it's almost this panic of we or I managing, a network, planning this infrastructure build. I don't know how to do that. So how, as someone that is feeling panicked by that, I hear you saying, find a firm, find a trusted partner, find someone. If you don't have the current capacity to do that, get that going as part of your process. Would you say that that's something that you've been able to include in your grant funding requests? Is some money to support that?
It hasn't been allowable thus far within the construction funding, which, is a little bit hardship because you really need to understand, what that looks like for sustainability. I know that probably a lot of tribes are thinking about, okay, yes, we have this grant funding right now and we are, good through said period, but what happens day one when that grant funding isn't there? And that's the really critical term that you have to be prepared for. How are you going to cover staffing, everything from personnel and fringe rates and the insurance, certifications, all of the things that come with that business development. So it absolutely needs to be thought out from the very beginning, as you're building out for all of those considerations.
Can you tell us some specific things that you have done to improve sustainability for your telecom program?
So first and foremost, I have to give credit to the team that we've developed, because obviously it's not just myself, because I have to essentially manage all of our divisions. We have a broadband manager, Matthew Douglas, who goes by Spaggy, and I've really appreciated his creativity to think about not just broadband service. So in our region, we don't have the customer base just to be serving and sustainable off the monthly revenue. We have to think of outside services. And so, we're looking into VoIP phone systems and providing that. We're looking at potentially managed IT services, for our grocery store and our mini mart and other tribal casino, to where we can pair and provide outside services for that monthly revenue. We have an opportunity to do long-term maintenance as part of our broadband grant with the California Department of Technology for a 20-year period. So it's thinking about outside of monthly revenue, what services can we provide? Hoopa is looking to be, for long term, to be a regional fiber maintenance construction crew. We are in a remote rural area where there's not a lot of fiber maintenance companies, especially for ours. And so we're looking to partner with regional projects and be that provider, because we are boots on the ground. They're not having to roll trucks and equipment and experts, from out of state or other regions. So we are looking at those business components that compare the internet service and how can we maximize that. And so each tribe is going to be different because we're different locations. We have different functions, but I think all of us are going to have to look at how can we generate revenue outside of monthly revenue for the services to support the overall business.
So when I hear you say outside services, I know you're talking about outside services from just the internet service that you're providing. Are you also talking about providing services to non-tribal members and outside of the tribal community?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. We are actually, Hoopa has a larger Aboriginal territory, as most tribes do. So they might have a land base, but their larger Aboriginal territory is a lot larger than that. We are currently doing environmental studies and fiber design build out for an adjacent town, which is part of our territory as well. And so we're looking at expanding out in that region as well, so we can be sustainable. There's not a provider there that is installing in fiber optic networks. We're going to have to look at a hybrid build for underground and aerial, and have those customers be able to offset the costs for that. So I think that tribes need to be thinking creatively that you just don't have to, stay within your territory. Think larger and broader of the other areas that you can serve, because it doesn't have to just be your tribal nation. So that's kind of an exciting thing that we're working on as well. And we hope to be able to secure construction funding once we're done with all of the studies.